The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Ventura, California, and Amelia Lancaster's scream died in her throat as she watched the cowboy dive in front of her father, taking a bullet meant for the banker. Blood bloomed across Xavier's worn shirt as he crumpled to the ground, and in that moment, everything Amelia thought she knew about courage and character shattered like glass. It was the spring of 1882, and Ventura had been enjoying a period of relative peace after the rough years that followed the Mexican land grants and the arrival of the Southern Pacific Railroad. The town sat nestled between the Pacific Ocean and the mountains, its main street lined with wooden buildings that creaked in the salt-tinged breeze. Harold Lancaster owned the largest bank in town, a two-story brick building that stood as a monument to his success and influence. He was a man who measured worth in gold coins and property deeds, who believed that a person's value could be tallied in a ledger book. Amelia had grown up in the finest house in Ventura, with servants and silk dresses imported from San Francisco, piano lessons and French tutors. At 22 years old, she was expected to marry well, to choose from among the sons of ranchers and businessmen who called on her in the parlor with their slicked hair and practiced compliments. She smiled politely at these suitors, poured tea with graceful hands, and felt absolutely nothing. Xavier had arrived in Ventura 6 months earlier, riding a horse that looked as tired as he did, with nothing but the clothes on his back and a battered saddle that had seen better days. He was 24, tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin, and hands calloused from years of hard work. He found employment at the Martinez Ranch on the outskirts of town, earning barely enough to rent a small room above the general store and keep himself fed. The other cowboys called him lucky, though there seemed to be nothing particularly fortunate about his circumstances. Amelia first saw him on a Tuesday morning in late October when she accompanied her father to the general store. Wade was loading supplies onto a wagon, his movements efficient and careful. When he touched his hat to her in greeting, she noticed his eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray with flecks of blue, and they held an intelligence that surprised her. Most cowboys she had encountered were rough men, good with horses and ropes but lacking in education or refinement. There was something different about Xavier, though she could not have explained what it was. "Good morning, miss," he said, his voice quiet and respectful. "Good morning," she replied, and that should have been the end of it. Her father barely glanced at the cowboy, dismissing him as beneath notice. Harold Lancaster had built his fortune through careful calculation and an unwavering belief in the social order. Cowboys were laborers, interchangeable and forgettable. His daughter would marry someone of consequence, someone worthy of the Lancaster name. But fate has a way of ignoring carefully laid plans. It was a Friday afternoon when Amelia's horse spooked on the road outside town. She had been riding alone, something her father disapproved of but which she did anyway, craving the brief freedom it offered. A rattlesnake sunning itself on a rock sent her mare into a panic, and suddenly, Amelia was fighting to stay in the saddle as the horse reared and bolted. She managed to hold on for perhaps half a mile before her grip failed, and she tumbled to the ground, landing hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. She lay there gasping, watching her horse disappear in a cloud of dust, when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Xavier pulled his horse to a stop and dismounted in one fluid motion, kneeling beside her with genuine concern etched across his face. "Are you hurt, Miss Lancaster?" His hands hovered near her shoulders, wanting to help but respectful of propriety. "I think I am all right," she managed, though her left wrist throbbed painfully and her pride was thoroughly bruised. "Just give me a moment." He waited patiently while she caught her breath, then offered his hand to help her stand. When she tried to put weight on her left wrist, she gasped at the sharp pain. "Might be sprained," Wade observed. "Let me get you back to town. I will catch your mare later." He helped her onto his horse with careful hands, then swung up behind her. Amelia had never been in such close proximity to a man who was not family, and she found herself acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of his chest against her back, the gentle way he handled the reins so as not to jostle her injured wrist. "Thank you," she said quietly as they rode toward town. "You did not have to stop." "Of course I did." He sounded genuinely puzzled by the suggestion that he might have done otherwise. "Could not leave you hurt on the road." "Many would have," she said, thinking of some of the young men who courted her, who were always calculating advantage and inconvenience. "Then they are not much as men," Wade replied simply. They rode in silence for a while, the horse's steady gait rocking them slightly. Amelia found herself studying his hands on the reins, noting the scars and calluses that spoke of hard work and harder times. "You are from Texas originally," she said, recognizing the faint accent he tried to hide. "Yes, madam. Near San Antonio. Left after my parents passed from fever." "Nothing to keep me there. Do you like California? It is beautiful country," he said carefully, "though I cannot say I have seen much beyond the ranch and town." "The ocean is quite spectacular," Amelia said. "Have you been to the shore?" "Once." "Took my breath away, all that water stretching to the horizon. Never imagined such a thing growing up where I did, where water was precious and scarce." There was poetry in the way he spoke, an appreciation for beauty that surprised her. When they reached the edge of town, Wade slowed the horse. "I should let you down here," he said quietly. "Would not want to cause talk, riding in together like this." Amelia understood. A banker's daughter and a poor cowboy arriving together would set tongues wagging. But something in her rebelled at the unfairness of it, the idea that this kind man who had helped her should have to worry about damaging her reputation simply by being decent. "Ride me straight to the doctor's office," she said firmly. "I will not have you worry about gossip when I might have a broken wrist." She felt him hesitate. Then he nodded and urged the horse forward down Main Street. People did indeed stop and stare as they passed, and Amelia kept her head high, refusing to show embarrassment or shame. Wade helped her down in front of Dr. Morrison's office, his touch careful and brief. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier," she said formally, aware of the watching eyes. "Hope your wrist heals quickly, Miss Lancaster," he replied, touching his hat before mounting his horse and riding away. Dr. Morrison confirmed that her wrist was badly sprained but not broken, wrapped it securely, and gave her a sling to wear for the next few weeks. Her father arrived within the hour, summoned by one of the many helpful townspeople who had rushed to inform him of his daughter's scandalous arrival with the poorest cowboy in Ventura. "What were you thinking?" Harold demanded once they were in his carriage heading home. "Being carried through town by that nobody. Do you have any idea how that looked?" "It looked like a gentleman helping someone in distress," Amelia replied coolly. "My horse threw me. Mr. Xavier came to my aid. Would you have preferred I walk back to town with a sprained wrist?" "I would have preferred you not be riding alone in the first place," her father said, his mustache bristling with irritation. "And if you needed assistance, could it not have been from someone respectable? Anyone else?" "He was the one who stopped," Amelia said. "I am grateful to him." Her father made a dismissive sound. "I will send him payment for his trouble. That will settle the matter." "Father, he does not want payment. He helped me because it was the right thing to do." "Everyone wants payment, Amelia. The sooner you learn that, the better. People act out of self-interest always." Amelia said nothing more, but her father's words sat uneasily with her. She had seen Xavier's face when he found her injured on the road. There had been no calculation in his expression, no consideration of what he might gain. Just honest concern and a desire to help. Over the following weeks, Amelia found herself thinking about the cowboy more than she should. She made inquiries, careful and subtle, learning what she could about him. He was known as reliable and hardworking, quiet but friendly, someone who kept his word and never caused trouble. He sent most of his wages back to Texas, to an orphanage where he had lived for a time after his parents died. He read books, borrowed from anyone who would lend them, and was teaching himself from a law primer he had found discarded in the general store. "Why law?" she asked him, surprising both of them when she approached him outside the church one Sunday after services. He looked startled to be addressed by her in public, glancing around as if expecting her father to materialize an object. "Miss Lancaster, your wrist is healing well, I hope?" "Yes, thank you. You did not answer my question." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable with her directness but too honest to deflect. "I suppose because the law should be the same for everyone, regardless of their circumstances. But it often is not. I would like to understand why and perhaps someday help change that." "A noble ambition," Amelia said softly. "An unlikely one," Wade replied with a self-deprecating smile. "Law school costs money I will never have, but reading about it costs nothing but time." "I have law books," Amelia said impulsively. "My grandfather was an attorney in Boston. His library is still in our house, gathering dust. You would be welcome to borrow from it." Wade's expression flickered with longing before he shook his head. "That is kind, but I could not. Your father would not approve." "My father need not know," Amelia said. "I will leave books at the general store with instructions that you may borrow them. No one need be aware of the arrangement." "Why would you do that?" Wade asked, his gray eyes searching her face. Amelia considered the question, aware that she was standing at a crossroads, that her answer mattered more than simple words usually did. "Because you want to learn, and I believe people who want to better themselves should be helped, not hindered by accident of birth or circumstance." Something shifted between them in that moment, an understanding that went beyond words. Wade nodded slowly. "Then I would be grateful for the loan of the books, and I promised to care for them well." And so began their unusual friendship. Amelia would bring books to the general store, tucked in her shopping basket, and leave them with Mrs. Chen, the shopkeeper's wife, who found the whole arrangement terribly romantic and kept their secret faithfully. Wade would collect the books, read them with painstaking care, and return them with notes tucked inside, questions and observations that showed his sharp mind and careful reasoning. Amelia found herself looking forward to these notes, to the glimpses they gave her into Wade's thoughts. She would write responses in the margins, and thus they carried on a conversation through borrowed books and careful handwriting. They discussed the Constitution and contract law, property rights and criminal justice. Wade's questions were insightful, revealing a natural aptitude for legal thinking that would have been nurtured and developed had he been born into different circumstances. They began to encounter each other, accidentally at first, and then less so. Amelia would ride out toward the Martinez ranch, and Wade would happen to be mending fence along the road. They would talk for a few minutes, careful to remain visible and proper, but those brief conversations became the highlights of Amelia's week. Wade told her about growing up in Texas, about his parents who had been educated people fallen on hard times, about his dreams and hopes that he shared with no one else. Amelia spoke of feeling trapped by expectations, of wanting more from life than endless tea parties and suitable marriage proposals. "You could have anything you want," Wade said once, genuine confusion in his voice. "You have education, money, position." "I have what my father wants," Amelia corrected. "That is not the same thing." "What do you want?" Wade asked. Amelia looked at him, at this man who saw her as a person rather than a prize or a pawn, and felt something shift inside her chest. "I want to make my own choices," she said quietly. "I want to matter for more than whose daughter I am or whose wife I will become." "You already matter," Wade said, and the way he looked at her made her breath catch. They were falling in love, though neither spoke the words aloud. It was there in the way Wade's face lit up when he saw her, in how Amelia's heart raced when she heard his voice. It was there in the careful way they did not touch, knowing that a single moment of contact might shatter the fragile proprieties that allowed them to continue meeting. It was there in the books passed between them, filled with thoughts and dreams and careful confessions. Winter arrived, bringing rain that turned the streets to mud and kept people indoors. Amelia chafed at the restrictions, finding excuses to go into town whenever possible, hoping for a glimpse of Wade. Her father grew increasingly insistent that she choose a suitor from among her approved options. Thomas Whitmore, son of a prominent rancher, was his favorite. Thomas was handsome in a conventional way, wealthy, and interested in Amelia primarily as an ornament to his own ambitions. He would make an excellent husband, Harold insisted over dinner one evening. The Whitmores own thousands of acres. Their cattle operation is one of the largest in the county. Thomas is positioned to become quite influential. "He is also boring and treats me like I am simple-minded," Amelia replied, pushing food around her plate. "Marriage is not about entertainment, Amelia. It is about security, position, creating a life of comfort and consequence." "You loved Mother," Amelia said quietly. "She told me before she died that you courted her with poetry and wildflowers." Her father's expression softened briefly before hardening again. "That was different. Your mother was suitable in every way. Our affection was a bonus, not the foundation. You are being foolish and romantic, waiting for some fairy tale that does not exist." But Amelia knew it did exist, because she felt it every time she saw Wade Xavier. The question was what, if anything, she could do about it. The answer came in March, in the form of violence that changed everything. Two men rode into Ventura with robbery on their minds and desperation in their eyes. They were brothers, the Keller brothers, wanted for a string of holdups across Southern California. They hit the bank on a Thursday afternoon when Harold Lancaster was standing at the main counter, reviewing paperwork. They came in shooting, announcing their intentions with gunfire and shouted threats. Amelia was across the street at the milliner's shop when she heard the shots. She ran toward the bank without thinking, terror for her father overriding common sense. Other people were running away from the danger, but she pushed through them, gathering her skirts and racing toward the building. She reached the entrance just as the Keller brothers were leaving, sacks of money clutched in their hands. Her father appeared behind them, foolishly brave or bravely foolish, holding a pistol he barely knew how to use. "Stop right there," Harold shouted. One of the brothers spun and fired without hesitation. The bullet would have struck Harold Lancaster in the chest, would have killed him where he stood, except Wade Xavier came out of nowhere, throwing himself forward in a tackle that knocked the banker aside. The bullet hit Wade instead, high on his left shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to the wooden sidewalk. That was when Amelia screamed. The Keller brothers ran, mounting horses tied nearby and galloping out of town. The sheriff and his deputies would catch them 2 days later, but in that moment, all Amelia could see was Wade lying on the ground, blood soaking through his worn shirt, his face pale with shock. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against the wound without thinking about propriety or appearances. Her father was shouting something. Other people were gathering, but all that mattered was the man bleeding under her hands. "You are going to be fine," she said, her voice shaking. "Wade, look at me. You are going to be fine." His gray eyes focused on her face, and despite the pain he must have been in, he managed a weak smile. "Had to stop," he murmured. "Could not let him shoot your father." "You stupid, brave, wonderful man," Amelia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why did you do that?" "You know why," Wade said, and then his eyes closed. Dr. Morrison took charge, barking orders and clearing space. Strong men carried Wade to the doctor's office while Amelia followed, ignoring her father's demands that she come away. She stood outside the surgery room, her dress stained with Wade's blood. Her hands shaking, her father appeared beside her, looking shaken and confused. "He saved my life," Harold said, as if unable to quite process this fact. "That cowboy saved my life." "His name is Wade, Xavier," Amelia said, not looking at her father. "And yes, he saved your life. Why would he do such a thing? He does not even know me." "Because he is a good man," Amelia replied. "Because he sees someone in danger and he helps, regardless of the cost to himself. Because he is worth 100 Thomas Whitmores and you were too blind to see it." Harold Lancaster stared at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw the truth written plainly across her face. "You care for him." "I love him," Amelia said simply. "I love him, father, and I will not pretend otherwise any more." Her father opened his mouth, closed it, then sank into a chair. "A cowboy, the poorest man in town. Amelia, this is impossible." "He is lying in there fighting for his life because he saved yours," Amelia said, her voice hard. "Do not tell me what is impossible." They waited through the afternoon and into the evening. Dr. Morrison finally emerged, wiping blood from his hands, his expression cautiously optimistic. "The bullet passed through cleanly, missed the bone and major vessels. He lost a lot of blood, but he is young and strong. I believe he will recover." Amelia felt her knees go weak with relief. "May I see him?" The doctor hesitated, glancing at her father. Harold Lancaster looked at his daughter, at the desperation and love so clear in her eyes, and something in him shifted. "Let her see him." Wade was unconscious, his shoulder heavily bandaged, his face pale against the white sheets. Amelia sat beside the bed and took his hand carefully, mindful of the doctor's presence, but beyond caring what anyone thought. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving him. Thank you for being you." She sat with him through the night, dozing in the chair beside his bed, waking whenever he stirred. Her father came and went, bringing her food she barely touched, a shawl against the night chill. He said nothing, but his expression was troubled, a man having his certainties challenged. Wade woke as dawn light filtered through the windows. His eyes found Amelia immediately, and despite his obvious pain, he smiled. "Still here." "Where else would I be?" Amelia said, squeezing his hand gently. "Your father must be furious." "My father is reevaluating several things," Amelia replied. "As he should." Wade's expression grew serious. "Amelia, you should not damage your reputation for me. Once I am recovered, I will leave town. This does not have to affect your life." "You are not leaving," Amelia said firmly. "Not unless you want to, and even then I would follow you. You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying. I love you, Wade Xavier. I have loved you for months, and I am done pretending otherwise." Wade's breath caught. "I am nobody. I have nothing to offer you." "You have yourself, and that is everything I want." Amelia leaned forward, her voice intense. "Do you love me?" "More than my next breath," Wade said without hesitation. "But loving you and being right for you are different things." "Let me decide what is right for me," Amelia said. I am so tired of other people making my choices. Wade studied her face, searching for doubt or hesitation and finding none. Your father will never accept me. He might surprise you, said Harold Lancaster from the doorway. Both Wade and Amelia jumped, not having heard him enter. The banker walked slowly into the room, his expression unreadable. How are you feeling, Mr. Xavier? I have been better, sir, Wade said warily. Harold pulled a chair over and sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 53 years. You saved my life yesterday. Threw yourself in front of a bullet meant for me. Why? Wade met the older man's eyes steadily. Because it was the right thing to do, sir. It was a foolish thing to do. You could have died. Yes, sir. And you did it anyway. Yes, sir. Harold was quiet for a long moment. I have spent my life believing that a man's worth could be measured in dollars and property. I have judged people by their bank accounts and their family names. You have nothing by those standards, Mr. Xavier. You are, by every measure I have used, the least suitable man in this town. Wade's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. And yet, Harold continued, you saved my life without hesitation. You have been secretly educating yourself in law, showing ambition and intelligence. You have been kind to my daughter, treating her with respect when you could have taken advantage of her foolish secrecy. He glanced at Amelia, who had the grace to look slightly guilty. Yes, I know about the books, Mrs. Chen's husband cannot keep a secret from me any better than anyone else who has a loan at my bank. Father, Amelia started, but Harold held up a hand. Let me finish. I have watched you these past months, Mr. Xavier, though you did not know it. I have made inquiries, learned about the money you send to orphanages, about your character and your reputation. I told myself it did not matter, that my daughter could not possibly be serious about a penniless cowboy. I was wrong. Wade and Amelia stared at him. You are wrong about many things as it happens, Harold went on. You are wrong if you think you have nothing to offer. Character cannot be bought, Mr. Xavier. Courage cannot be purchased. And love, he looked at his daughter. Love is worth more than all the cattle ranches and bank accounts in California. Sir, Wade said carefully, are you saying, I am saying that if my daughter loves you and if you love her, then you have my blessing to court her properly. I am also saying that I need a new assistant at the bank, someone I can trust, someone with a good mind who wants to learn the business. The position comes with a proper salary, one that would allow a man to support a wife, should he be lucky enough to find one. The room fell silent. Amelia looked at her father with tears in her eyes. Wade seemed unable to speak, shock and hope warring across his features. I do not deserve this, Wade finally managed. You saved my life, Harold said simply. More than that, you have shown me that I have been measuring worth all wrong. I have been a fool and a snob, and I almost lost my daughter because of it. Do not make me regret this offer by being too proud to accept it. I accept, Wade said quickly. Sir, I accept, and I swear I will work harder than anyone, learn everything, prove you right to trust me. I know you will, Harold said, standing up. Now rest and recover. We will discuss details when you are back on your feet. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Mr. Xavier, when you do propose to my daughter, and we all know you will, please do me the courtesy of asking my permission first. I would like to say yes properly. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Wade and Amelia looked at each other in stunned silence. Did that really just happen? Wade asked. I think it did, Amelia said, starting to laugh and cry at the same time. I think my father just gave us his blessing. I love you, Wade said, his voice rough with emotion. Amelia, I love you so much, and I promise I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. You are already worthy, Amelia said, leaning forward to press a gentle kiss to his forehead. You have always been worthy. Wade's recovery took 6 weeks, during which Amelia spent nearly every day at his bedside, propriety maintained by the presence of Mrs. Chen, who appointed herself chaperone and took the job seriously. Wade proved to be a terrible patient, restless and eager to be up and working, but Amelia kept him entertained with books and conversation, with games of chess and stories from her childhood. They talked about everything. Wade spoke of his dreams for the future, how he wanted to make something of himself, to prove that a man's beginnings did not have to determine his end. Amelia shared her frustrations with the limited roles available to women, her desire to be more than decorative, to contribute something meaningful to the world. They discovered they both loved poetry, that neither much cared for oysters, that they shared a dream of traveling to San Francisco someday to see the opera. Harold Lancaster stopped by regularly, at first awkwardly, and then with increasing ease. He brought Wade newspapers and discussed business, testing the younger man's mind and finding it sharp. He told stories about building the bank, about mistakes he had made and lessons learned. A tentative friendship began to grow between them, built on mutual respect and gratitude. When Wade was finally cleared to leave the doctor's care, Harold had a room prepared for him in a boarding house that catered to respectable businessmen, paying the rent in advance over Wade's protests. "You will need somewhere decent to live if you are working at my bank," Harold said firmly. "Consider it an advance on your salary if it makes you feel better." Wade started at the bank in May, beginning with simple tasks but learning quickly. Harold was a demanding teacher but a fair one, and he recognized Wade's natural aptitude for numbers and contracts. The other bank employees were initially suspicious of the cowboy elevated to their ranks, but Wade's courtesy and work ethic gradually won them over. The town gossips had a field day with the situation. The banker's daughter and the cowboy who saved his life became the favorite topic of conversation in every parlor and saloon. Some thought it romantic, others scandalous, but no one could deny the evidence of their own eyes. Xavier treated Amelia Lancaster with a respect and devotion that made even the cynics soften. And Amelia glowed with happiness in a way that made it clear this was no passing fancy. Wade courted Amelia properly, as tradition demanded. He called on her in the parlor, under her father's watchful but approving eye. He escorted her to church on Sundays and to town socials. He brought her wildflowers, remembering her story of how her father had courted her mother. They took long walks, always chaperoned, talking and laughing and falling deeper in love. One evening in June, Wade asked Harold for a private word in his study. Amelia paced nervously in the parlor, though she knew what was coming. When the study door opened, both men emerged smiling. "He said yes," Wade told her, his eyes shining. "Of course I said yes," Harold grumbled, but his own eyes were suspiciously bright. "Now go ask her properly." Wade dropped to one knee right there in the hallway, taking Amelia's hand in his. "Amelia Lancaster, you are the smartest, bravest, most wonderful woman I have ever known. You saw something in me when I was nobody, when I had nothing. You taught me that I was worth more than my circumstances. Will you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Amelia said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." They kissed for the first time, sweet and tender, while Harold politely pretended to study a painting on the wall. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and beaming, the banker cleared his throat. "I suppose we should discuss wedding plans," he said. "Though I warn you both, half the town will expect to be invited." The wedding took place in September, when the worst of summer's heat had passed, and the air held the first hints of autumn. They were married in Ventura's church, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Amelia wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered to fit, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers mixed with roses from the Whitmore Ranch. Thomas Whitmore himself attended with his new fiancée, a girl from Santa Barbara who seemed to suit him much better than Amelia ever had. Wade stood at the altar in a new suit, purchased with his own money earned at the bank, his face full of such love and wonder that several ladies in the congregation openly wept. When he spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure, promising to love and cherish Amelia all the days of his life. Amelia's own voice shook with emotion as she made her promises, looking into Wade's gray eyes and seeing their entire future reflected there. Harold Lancaster gave his daughter away with both pride and sadness, the natural melancholy of a father watching his child begin a new chapter. But when he placed Amelia's hand in Wade's, he felt certain he was doing the right thing, trusting his daughter's happiness to a man who would guard it with his life. The reception was held at the Lancaster house, with tables groaning under the weight of food and drink. People danced in the garden, strings of lanterns providing light as evening fell. Wade and Amelia moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes, but their attention was always on each other, magnetic and constant. "Happy," Wade murmured during a moment of relative privacy. "Deliriously," Amelia replied. I keep thinking I will wake up and find this was all a dream." "If it is, then we are dreaming the same dream," Amelia said, squeezing his hand, "and I never want to wake." They spent their wedding night in the bridal suite of Ventura's finest hotel, nervous and eager and full of love. Wade was gentle and patient, and Amelia was brave and trusting, and they learned each other in the soft darkness, making promises with bodies that words could not capture. Harold had given them a small house as a wedding gift, a pretty cottage on the edge of town with a garden and room to grow. They moved in with joy, making it their own, filling it with books and laughter. Amelia learned to cook, with mixed results that Wade ate gamely regardless. Wade worked at the bank during the day and studied law in the evenings, still pursuing his dream of understanding justice. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, as all first years are. They learned each other's habits and quirks, discovered how to argue fairly and make up sweetly. Wade learned that Amelia was stubborn and fierce when roused, that she had strong opinions about everything from politics to pie crust. Amelia learned that Wade had nightmares sometimes, legacy of a childhood that had been harder than he usually admitted, and that he calmed when she held him and reminded him he was safe. They grew together, roots intertwining, becoming a unit stronger than either individual. Wade proved himself invaluable at the bank, and Harold began grooming him to eventually take over the business. Amelia started a small school in their home, teaching reading and arithmetic to children whose families could not afford regular schooling. She discovered she had a gift for teaching, a patience and creativity that made learning fun. In their second year of marriage, Amelia realized she was pregnant. She told Wade over dinner, watching his face cycle through shock and joy and wonder in rapid succession. "A baby," he said, as if testing the word. "We are having a baby in about 6 months," Amelia confirmed, smiling at his expression. Wade came around the table and pulled her into his arms, careful and tender. "I am going to be a father. Amelia, I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father," she assured him. "I do not know how," Wade said, a thread of fear in his voice. "My own father died when I was so young. What if I do it wrong?" "Then we will figure it out together," Amelia said firmly, "just like we figure out everything else." Harold was overjoyed at the news of a grandchild, immediately beginning to plan nurseries and trust funds. Mrs. Chen started knitting tiny clothes. The whole town seemed invested in the pregnancy, offering advice and predictions and old wives' tales. The baby came in March of 1885, during a spring storm that rattled the windows and turned the streets to rivers of mud. Dr. Morrison arrived at the house to find Wade pacing frantically, while Amelia labored upstairs. The birth was long and difficult, and Wade wore a path in the floor with his worried walking. When the baby's first cry finally pierced the air, Wade nearly fell over with relief. Dr. Morrison appeared at the top of the stairs, grinning widely. "You have a son, Wade. A healthy son, and your wife is tired but fine." Wade took the stairs 3 at a time, bursting into the bedroom where Amelia lay exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at her husband with such love that Wade's throat tightened. "Meet your son," she said softly. Wade approached slowly, almost reverently, peering at the small red face that was already capturing his heart. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that might someday be gray like his father's. Tiny fingers curled and uncurled, and Wade reached out to touch them, marveling at their perfection. "He is so small," Wade whispered. "He will grow," Amelia said. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names extensively during the pregnancy, debating options and meanings. "What about William?" Wade suggested. "For your grandfather, the attorney. William Harold Xavier." "William," Amelia tested the name, looking down at her son. "Yes, I think that suits him perfectly." Harold arrived within the hour, having been fetched by Mrs. Chen. He held his grandson with hands that shook slightly, emotion written plainly across his usually stern face. "He looks like you did, Amelia, when you were born. Your mother would have loved him so much." "She would have loved Wade too," Amelia said softly. "I think she would be happy with the choice I made." "She would be proud," Harold agreed. "I know I am." The years that followed were full and happy. William grew from infant to toddler, his personality emerging bright and curious. He had his mother's stubbornness and his father's careful observation, a combination that kept his parents constantly on their toes. Wade continued to rise at the bank, eventually becoming Harold's full partner, his opinions valued and his judgment trusted. Amelia's school expanded, moving from their home to a dedicated building that Harold helped fund, serving more children each year. In 1887, Amelia gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, who had her father's gray eyes and her mother's fierce spirit. 2 years later, another son arrived, James, who was quiet and gentle from the start. The house filled with noise and chaos and love, children running through rooms that echoed with laughter. Wade never forgot where he had come from, and as his circumstances improved, he made sure to help others. He established a scholarship fund for young people who wanted education but lacked means. He hired cowboys down on their luck at the bank, giving them chances to learn new skills. He visited the orphanage where he had lived as a boy, bringing donations and hope. Amelia worked tirelessly for women's education, believing that girls deserved the same opportunities as boys. She taught her daughter to be strong and independent, to know her own worth. She taught her sons to value character over wealth, kindness over status. She and Wade raised their children with love and discipline, high expectations and unconditional support. Harold Lancaster lived to see his grandchildren grow, to watch Wade transform from that poorest cowboy into one of the most respected men in Ventura. On his deathbed in 1895, he called Wade and Amelia to his side. "I was wrong about you," he told Wade, his voice weak but clear. "That day you rode into town with nothing. I dismissed you as nobody. I almost missed the finest man I ever knew because I was too blind to see past poverty to character. "You changed your mind," Wade said, holding the old man's hand. "That took courage, too." "I learned why too late," Harold said. "Almost too late. I almost lost my daughter's happiness because I measured worth in all the wrong ways." He looked at Amelia. "But you knew better. You saw what I could not." "I saw a good man," Amelia said, tears streaming down her face. "I saw the man I loved." "Take care of each other," Harold whispered. "Take care of my grandchildren. Live well and love much." He died peacefully that night, with his family around him, having made his peace with the world and his mistakes. Wade took over the bank completely, running it with the same integrity Harold had taught him. He never forgot the fear of poverty, the shame of being dismissed as nobody, and he made the bank a place that gave chances to those others overlooked. He approved loans for people with more character than collateral, and while some thought him too soft, his instincts proved sound more often than not. Amelia's school became one of the finest in the county, known for its progressive methods and excellent results. She taught that every child had worth, regardless of their family's circumstances. Former students often returned to thank her, telling stories of opportunities that education had opened. The children grew and thrived. William attended university in San Francisco, studying law as his father had dreamed of doing. He returned to Ventura to practice, opening an office where he fought for justice and fairness. Elizabeth became a teacher like her mother, fierce and passionate about education for all. James took over the bank eventually, his gentle nature masking a sharp mind for business. Wade and Amelia grew older together, gray creeping into their hair, laugh lines deepening around their eyes. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching grandchildren play in the garden. They remembered those early days, the scandal of a banker's daughter falling for the poorest cowboy in town, the way love had transformed everything. "You ever regret it?" Wade asked once, when they were both in their 60s, married 4 decades and still as in love as ever. "Regret choosing you?" Amelia looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "Wade, Xavier, you have given me the finest life I could have imagined. We built this together. Our children, our work, this love we share. How could I possibly regret it?" "I gave you a harder life than you would have had with someone wealthy," Wade said. "You could have married ease and luxury." "I married love and partnership," Amelia corrected. "I married a man who sees me as an equal, who respects my mind and encourages my dreams. I married my best friend and the love of my life. The rest is just details." Wade smiled, that slow, warm smile that still made Amelia's heart skip after all these years. "I am the luckiest man who ever lived." "No," Amelia said, leaning over to kiss him softly. "We are the luckiest people who ever lived, because we found each other." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Ventura, over the town that had witnessed their unlikely love story. Around them, the evidence of their life together spread in every direction. Children and grandchildren, businesses and schools, lives touched and improved. All because a banker's daughter had looked past wealth and status to see character and worth. All because a poor cowboy had proven that true value has nothing to do with money. Harold Lancaster had learned the lesson too late, had almost lost everything that truly mattered by measuring worth in dollars and property. But he had learned, had changed, had recognized that his daughter's happiness lay not in the wealthiest suitor but in the best man. And that recognition, that growth, had allowed a love story to flourish that became the stuff of legend in Ventura. A tale told and retold about choosing character over comfort, love over luxury. Years continued to pass, marked by seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. Wade and Amelia watched their grandchildren grow, delighting in each personality and achievement. The bank continued to thrive under James's management, carrying on the tradition of giving chances to those who deserved them. William's law practice became known throughout California for its fairness and fierce advocacy for the vulnerable. Elizabeth's school trained a generation of teachers who spread her methods across the state. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the town threw a massive celebration. It seemed everyone in Ventura turned out to honor the couple whose love story had become woven into the town's identity. People came from distant places, former students and bank customers, cowboys who Wade had hired and given chances, women Amelia had taught and encouraged. Speeches were made, praising Wade's integrity and business acumen, Amelia's vision and dedication. But the real testament was in the faces of the people gathered. The lives changed and improved by this couple who had dared to love across class boundaries, who had built something meaningful together. William stood to give a toast, his voice carrying across the crowded room. My parents taught me that character matters more than circumstances, that love is worth fighting for, that one person can make a difference if they have courage and conviction. They lived these lessons, did not just preach them. They showed all of us what is possible when you measure people by their hearts rather than their holdings. The crowd applauded, and Wade and Amelia stood together, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. They looked at each other, and in that glance passed 50 years of memories, of struggles overcome and joys celebrated, of love that had only deepened with time. Worth it, Wade murmured, so only she could hear. Every moment, Amelia replied. Every single moment. They danced that night, moving slowly to music played by the town band, surrounded by people who loved them. The years showed in their steps, but the grace was still there. The connection that had drawn them together decades before in a dusty California town, where a banker's daughter had seen past poverty to promise, where the poorest cowboy had proven that wealth of character outweighed any fortune. As they grew older still, Wade and Amelia settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings on the porch with coffee and newspapers, discussing events and ideas with the same engagement they had always shared. Afternoons visiting with grandchildren, passing on wisdom and stories. Evenings reading together, often the same law books that had been their early connection, now dog-eared and beloved. Wade's health began to fail in his 73rd year. His heart, the doctor said, worn out from a lifetime of work and worry. He accepted the news with characteristic calm, more concerned about Amelia than himself. She refused to allow despair, insisting they make the most of whatever time remained. They took a trip to San Francisco, finally seeing the opera they had talked about since their courting days. They visited old friends and made new memories. They gathered their children and grandchildren and spoke of love and legacy, of living with integrity and courage. Wade made sure his affairs were in order, that Amelia would be cared for, that his various charitable works would continue. I am not afraid, he told Amelia one evening, lying in their bed with her hand in his. I have lived a better life than I ever dreamed possible. I loved the most amazing woman, raised good children, made a difference where I could. What more could any man ask? You could ask for more time, Amelia said, tears she could not quite hide in her voice. I got 53 years with you, Wade replied. 53 years I did nothing to deserve but was blessed with anyway. That is more than enough. It will never be enough, Amelia whispered. How am I supposed to live without you? The way you have always lived, Wade said gently. With courage and grace and love, you will continue teaching, continue making a difference. You will be there for our children and grandchildren. You will carry our love forward, and I will be with you always, even when you cannot see me. Wade died on a spring morning, peacefully in his sleep with Amelia beside him. The town mourned the loss of one of its finest citizens. The bank closed for 3 days. The school held a special assembly where students shared stories of kindness and wisdom. The church overflowed at his funeral, people standing in the street outside to pay their respects. Amelia stood dry-eyed through the service, drawing on reserves of strength she had built over a lifetime. She spoke at the funeral, her voice clear and steady, telling the story of a poor cowboy who had saved her father's life and captured her heart, who had proven that worth has nothing to do with wealth. That character is the only currency that truly matters. Xavier arrived in Ventura with nothing but the clothes on his back and a good heart, she said. He left behind a legacy of integrity, generosity, and love that will endure long after all of us are gone. He taught all of us, that we are not defined by our circumstances but by our choices, not by what we have but by what we give. He was the finest man I ever knew, and I was privileged to walk through life beside him. Amelia lived another 12 years, remaining active and engaged until nearly the end. She continued teaching, though at a reduced schedule, still believing that education was the key to opportunity. She doted on great-grandchildren, passing on stories of Wade and the love that had changed so many lives. She maintained the charitable foundations they had built together, ensuring his vision continued. She died at 87, surrounded by family, her hand held by her granddaughter who had been named for Elizabeth. Her last words were of Wade, calling his name as if seeing him waiting for her. Her children found comfort in the image, believing their father had indeed come to escort their mother home. Ventura erected a memorial in the town square, honoring both Wade and Amelia Xavier for their contributions to the community. The inscription read simply, "Character over circumstance, love over luxury, service over self." The school Amelia founded was renamed in her honor. The bank Wade had run continued to operate on the principles he had established, giving chances to those who deserved them. But perhaps the truest memorial was in the lives they had touched, the example they had set. Generations later, people in Ventura still told the story of the banker's daughter who chose the poorest cowboy in town, of the father who learned why too late but learned nonetheless, of a love that transcended class and circumstance to build something lasting and meaningful. It became more than a story. It became a reminder that worth cannot be measured in bank accounts, that character reveals itself in crisis, that love chosen wisely can transform everything it touches. It reminded people that second chances matter, that growth is possible at any age, that being wrong and learning to be right is its own kind of courage. The house where Wade and Amelia had raised their family eventually passed to great-grandchildren who maintained it lovingly, preserving the books in Wade's study and the teaching materials in Amelia's office. It became a kind of shrine, not to worship but to remember, to honor two ordinary people who had lived extraordinary love. Visitors could see the law books Wade had borrowed from Amelia during their courtship, could read the notes they had written in the margins, the conversation between two minds falling in love. They could see wedding photographs, Wade in his carefully saved suit and Amelia in her mother's dress, both faces glowing with joy. They could see family portraits spanning decades, the evidence of a life well lived and love well earned. The story spread beyond Ventura, becoming part of California folklore. Writers penned novels loosely based on their romance. Historians included them in studies of post-Civil War social mobility and changing class dynamics. Economists used Wade's business practices as examples of ethical banking. Educators studied Amelia's teaching methods, but at its heart it remained a love story, simple and profound. William Xavier, Wade and Amelia's eldest son, wrote a book about his parents late in his own life. In it, he tried to capture what had made their love so special, so enduring. He wrote about his father's integrity, his mother's courage, the way they had partnered in everything. But his conclusion was simple. They chose each other every day. In big ways and small, in easy times and hard, they continued to choose each other, to honor their commitment, to value what they had built together. That daily choice, renewed constantly, was the secret to their success. The scholarship fund Wade had established continued to support students for generations, the endowment carefully managed and grown. Hundreds of young people who might otherwise have lacked opportunity received education, went on to successful lives, often establishing their own charitable works in turn. The ripples spread outward, impossible to fully track but undeniably real. Amelia's school evolved with changing times, but retained its core mission of educating every child regardless of background. It pioneered programs for immigrant children, for those with learning differences, for any student who needed extra support. The motto above the door read, "Every child has worth," words Amelia had lived by and passed on. The bank eventually merged with a larger institution, as small banks often must, but retained the Xavier name in recognition of the reputation built over decades. New owners studied Wade's loan records, amazed at the success rate of investments made based on character assessment rather than pure financial calculation. Business schools used his methods as case studies in the value of qualitative judgment in financial decision-making. On the 100th anniversary of Wade and Amelia's wedding, Ventura held a week-long celebration. Descendants came from across the country, a sprawling family tree that included doctors and teachers, lawyers and artists, ranchers and entrepreneurs. What united them was the story of their ancestors, the foundation of love and character that had been laid so long ago. The mayor gave a speech at the celebration, standing beneath the memorial in the square. A century ago, Wade Xavier rode into Ventura with nothing. He left behind everything. Not money, though he earned enough to be comfortable. Not fame, though his name is certainly remembered. He left behind proof that how we live matters more than where we start, that choosing love and integrity and service creates ripples that extend far beyond our own lives. He and Amelia showed us what is possible when we look past surface circumstances to see true worth. That lesson is as vital today as it was then, and we honor their memory by living it ourselves. The crowd applauded, and among them, mixed in with the Xavier descendants, were people whose families had been helped by Wade's chances and Amelia's teaching, whose lives had been touched by the choices made so long ago by a banker's daughter and the poorest cowboy in town. Late that night, after the official ceremonies concluded, several of Wade and Amelia's great-great-grandchildren walked to the small cemetery on the edge of town. They found the simple headstone marking the graves, side by side as Wade and Amelia had been in life. Fresh flowers covered the site, left by various people throughout the day. The oldest of the group, a woman named Margaret who had inherited Amelia's fierce spirit, traced the words carved in the stone. "Together in life, together in death, together in love forever." "You think they knew?" asked her cousin Daniel. "When they chose each other, when everything was hard and uncertain, do you think they knew it would turn into all this?" Margaret considered the question, looking at the graves of ancestors she had never met but whose influence shaped her life. "I think they knew they loved each other. I think they knew they wanted to build something meaningful. The rest probably surprised them as much as anyone. But that is the thing about choosing love and character over easy and convenient. You cannot predict where it will lead, but you can trust it will lead somewhere worth going." They stood in silence for a while, these children of a legacy built on courage and conviction, on a banker's daughter who had seen past poverty to promise, and a poor cowboy who had proven her right to believe in him. The California stars shone overhead, the same stars that had looked down on Wade and Amelia all those decades ago when they had been young and in love and certain of nothing except each other. In the morning, life would continue. The Xavier descendants would return to their various homes and lives, carrying forward the lessons learned and the love inherited. Ventura would go about its business, a modern town that still remembered its past and the people who had shaped it. The school would welcome new students, the bank would open its doors, and somewhere a young person would receive a scholarship and a chance. The story of Wade and Amelia Xavier would continue to be told, passed down through generations, a reminder that the measure of a life lies not in wealth accumulated but in love shared, integrity maintained, and service rendered. It would remind people that character matters, that choices have consequences that ripple through time, that a banker's daughter choosing the poorest cowboy in town could change the world in ways large and small. And perhaps in some way beyond human understanding, Wade and Amelia knew their story continued, that their love had indeed proven powerful enough to echo through the years, inspiring and challenging and encouraging everyone who heard it. Perhaps they rested easy, knowing they had lived well and loved deeply, that they had made choices that honored both their hearts and their principles. The night wind whispered through the cemetery, gentle and warm, carrying the scent of wildflowers and ocean salt. And if someone listening closely might have heard something like laughter, joyful and young despite the century past, well, perhaps love truly does transcend time and death. Perhaps choosing each other every day creates something eternal. The story was complete, the circle closed, the legacy secure. A banker's daughter had chosen the poorest cowboy in town. Her father had learned why too late, had almost missed the lesson entirely, but had ultimately understood that worth cannot be measured in gold, that character outweighs wealth, that love matters most of all. And that understanding, that change of heart, had allowed a love story to flourish that became more than just romance. That became testament to the power of seeing people truly, of giving second chances, of building life on foundations of integrity and service. In the end, Wade and Amelia Xavier had proven that where you start matters far less than who you choose to be, that circumstances can be overcome through character and effort, that love chosen wisely and honored faithfully can indeed change the world. Their story, told and retold, would continue to inspire as long as people valued truth over appearances, substance over show, the content of hearts over the contents of bank accounts. And that seemed like legacy enough for anyone, a life well lived and a love story worth remembering.